I never thought I'd return home to find my mother gone. Dylan Hayes, a battle-hardened Marine, had spent years fighting for his country. But nothing could prepare him for the moment he stepped back into his childhood town with his loyal canine, Maverick, and discovered his mother was missing. A letter left behind, a single clue to her disappearance. "Find the truth, Dylan," it read. That was all. His heart sank. What had happened to the woman who raised him, who supported him through everything? What had you been hiding? Maverick's ears perked up, his eyes fixed on something in the corner of the room, a small, weathered journal. Dylan picked it up, dusted it off, and opened it. Inside were pages filled with secrets, scribbled in a hurry. There were names he didn't recognize, places he had never heard of, and a hidden treasure that seemed too unbelievable to be true. But the more Dylan read, the more his pulse quickened. The words described a past he never knew existed. A past his mother had buried deep, one full of lost opportunities, unspoken promises, and a legacy that would change everything. Maverick growled softly, his nose twitching. Dylan followed his dog's gaze to an old wooden chest in the corner of the room. It was locked, but something about it felt important. Dylan knelt down, his hands trembling slightly as he unlocked it. The moment the chest opened, a cold breeze swept through the room, making the hairs on his neck stand up. Inside, there were old photographs, documents, and a key that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. Dylan's heart raced. The key felt like a final clue, a piece of the puzzle his mother had left for him. But what did it unlock? As he examined the key, a sudden thought struck him. Was his mother's disappearance part of something bigger? Something darker? He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being led somewhere, and it wasn't just to the chest. Maverick barked, snapping Dylan out of his thoughts. They weren't alone. Dylan felt a chill down his spine as the silence grew heavier. He wasn't sure if it was the weight of the mystery or something more, something watching him from the shadows. He had no choice but to follow the trail. What lay ahead would test everything he thought he knew about his family, his past, and the man he had become. With Maverick by his side, Dylan knew he was on the verge of uncovering a truth that would change his life forever. But what if that truth was something he wasn't ready to face? Dylan's hands shook as he held the key in his palm, feeling its weight as if it held the answers to questions he didn't even know he was asking. Maverick's sharp eyes never left the chest, and with a low growl, the dog stood, his tail stiff. The air around them seemed to thicken, as if something ancient was stirring in the walls of this old house. Dylan knew that his mother's disappearance was no accident. There was something more, something buried beneath layers of time and secrets. As he inserted the key into the lock, it clicked open with an eerie finality. The chest creaked as the lid slowly rose, revealing its contents. Inside were old photographs, yellowing letters, and a collection of strange symbols he couldn't understand. But what caught his attention was a map, an old, faded map of the town, with markings that seemed too deliberate to be random. Dylan traced the lines with his finger, his mind racing. Each symbol, each line on the map pointed to something hidden, something forgotten. His mother had known about it. She had kept these secrets from him for years. Why? The thought gnawed at him, but before he could dwell too long, Maverick suddenly barked again, startling Dylan. The dog trotted over to the far corner of the room, his nose pressed against the wall. Dylan followed, his heart pounding. He ran his hand along the cold stone, searching for anything that might explain the dog's sudden behavior. And then he found it, a loose stone. It moved with a slight push, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside, there was another letter, this one addressed to him. Dylan's heart skipped a beat. With trembling hands, he tore open the envelope. The letter was written in his mother's familiar handwriting, though it was shaky, as if penned in a hurry. Dylan, if you're reading this, it means I'm no longer here. What you'll find next will change everything you thought you knew. I protected you from the truth, but now it's time for you to face it. Follow the map. The truth is buried beneath the old oak tree, but be careful. There are people who will stop at nothing to keep this secret hidden. Trust no one. Dylan's breath caught in his throat. He folded the letter carefully and looked at Maverick, who was still staring at him with an intensity that made him feel as though the dog knew more than he did. The truth was out there, and it was waiting for him. But what if it was more dangerous than he imagined? With a sense of resolve, Dylan grabbed the map and headed out of the house, Maverick right by his side. He followed the map's path through the winding streets, past familiar landmarks that now seemed foreign, as if the town itself had changed overnight. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the ground, but Dylan wasn't afraid. He knew that whatever awaited him, he would face it head-on. He arrived at the old oak tree just as the sky turned a deep shade of purple. The tree stood tall, its branches twisting into the sky like dark arms. Dylan could feel a strange pull, as if the earth beneath him was alive, breathing. Maverick circled the tree, sniffing the ground. And then Dylan saw it, a small patch of earth that had been disturbed, the soil slightly upturned. His pulse quickened as he dropped to his knees and began to dig. The dirt was soft, but it didn't take long before his hands hit something solid. He brushed away the dirt and gasped. It was a wooden box, old and weathered, just like the chest in the house. Dylan's heart raced as he carefully pried open the box. Inside was something he hadn't expected, a small, leather-bound journal, worn with age, and a key. The journal's pages were filled with more symbols, more secrets, and the key was unlike any he had seen before. Dylan's mind raced, but before he could examine it further, Maverick barked again, this time louder, more urgent. Dylan froze. He wasn't alone. Dylan's heart pounded as he stood frozen in the dimming light, the wooden box still open in his hands. Maverick, who had been quiet up until now, barked urgently, his body tense and his ears flat against. Took another step closer, his gaze now fixed on the journal in Dylan's hands. That journal, the man continued, and that key, they're part of something much bigger than you realize. And if you don't stop, it will change everything. Dylan's grip tightened on the journal. What are you talking about? The man took a deep breath, as if weighing his next words. I've been trying to stop this for years. Your mother knew. She knew what this town had buried, but she couldn't stop it. And now, it's your turn. The words hit Dylan like a punch to the gut. His mother had known about this, about the town's secrets, and why hadn't she told him? You can't hide the truth forever, Dylan said, his voice hard. The man's face darkened, his eyes flashing with something dangerous. The truth has a price, he said, his voice cold, and you're about to pay it. Dylan felt the air around him grow colder, his mind racing. What had he gotten himself into? What had his mother been trying to protect him from? The man stepped back into the shadows, his figure disappearing as quickly as it had appeared. Maverick growled once more, but Dylan held up a hand to calm him. The forest was silent again, but the tension remained, thick and suffocating. Dylan looked down at the journal in his hands, his mind spinning with questions. What was his mother involved in? What had she kept hidden all these years? And why had she left him with these clues? He couldn't stop now. He had to uncover the truth. But as he stood there, the weight of the man's warning echoed in his mind. The truth had a price, and Dylan was about to find out exactly what that price would be. Dylan stood motionless for a moment, the man's words still ringing in his ears. The truth has a price, he had said. He wasn't sure what to make of it. It felt like the weight of an ancient curse pressing down on him. His mother, the town, the key, the journal, everything was now tangled in a web he hadn't asked to be a part of. He looked down at the journal again, the leather creaking in his hands, and the key in his pocket seemed heavier than before. The air around him felt thick, charged with something. He couldn't quite put his finger on. Maverick was still alert, his ears pricked up, his amber eyes scanning the forest with caution. Dylan felt the unease crawl up his spine. He had always trusted his instincts, and right now, they were screaming at him to leave, to turn back and forget this whole thing. But the mystery, the need for answers, was too strong. He couldn't walk away. He would find out what his mother had been hiding, even if it meant digging through the darkest corners of this town's past. Dylan stood tall, his jaw set in determination. He walked to the old oak tree where he had found the hidden box. The map was still clutched tightly in his hand, and as he traced the lines with his finger, he noticed something he hadn't before, a name, written in faint ink, near the bottom of the map. It wasn't a place. It was a person's name, Samuel Fletcher. The name meant nothing to Dylan, but it was clear that this was a clue, a piece of the puzzle he couldn't ignore. Who was Samuel Fletcher? Why was his name connected to all of this? Dylan shoved the journal into his jacket and began to walk back toward the town, Maverick following closely behind. His mind raced with questions, but each step felt heavier than the last. As he neared the center of town, a cold breeze brushed past him, carrying with it a sense of urgency. Something was waiting. As he passed by the old diner, he noticed a figure standing in the doorway, watching him. The figure was tall, with a weathered face and dark eyes that seemed to see straight through him. Dylan slowed his pace, but the figure didn't move. It was as though time had frozen. The man said nothing, but the look he gave Dylan sent a chill down his spine. Dylan's instincts told him that this man knew something, that he held the key to the questions that had been consuming him. He stopped and turned to face him, his heart pounding in his chest. "Do you know who Samuel Fletcher is?" Dylan asked, his voice steady despite the rising tension. The man didn't respond right away, but his eyes shifted briefly to Maverick before returning to Dylan. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and gravelly. "You're looking for trouble, boy, and trouble's what you'll find." The words hit Dylan like a blow. "Who is Samuel Fletcher?" he pressed, his patience wearing thin. The man gave a slight chuckle, then shook his head. "That's a name you don't want to dig into. Trust me." Dylan wasn't going to back down. "Tell me who he is," he demanded, stepping closer. The man hesitated, then looked over his shoulder as if checking for someone. Fletcher was a man who disappeared a long time ago. Some say he knew too much about this town, about the secrets it buried. The man paused, then added, "But if you're set on this path, you'll need more than just a map and a key. You'll need answers, and those answers are locked away. And once you open those doors, there's no turning back." Dylan's pulse quickened. "Where do I find him?" The man took a step back into the diner, his eyes never leaving Dylan. "I can't help you," he said softly, "but I can tell you this. Whatever you think you're about to find, it's far darker than you realize. And you might not like what you uncover." The door to the diner shut behind him, leaving Dylan standing in the empty street. The words echoed in his mind as he looked down at the map again. Samuel Fletcher. The man's warning lingered in the air, but Dylan knew one thing. He was going to find the answers, no matter what it took. With Maverick by his side, he turned and walked toward the next step of the journey. The truth was waiting, and it was only a matter of time before he uncovered it. But with each step, Dylan felt the weight of the man's words growing heavier. There would be no turning back. Dylan stood motionless for a moment, the weight of the man's warning pressing down on him. The words "no turning back" echoed in his mind, but there was no going back now. Maverick sat at his feet, his loyal eyes watching the street ahead, waiting for the next move. Dylan's gaze shifted back to the map, and then to the key tucked safely in his pocket. Every step seemed to draw him closer to a mystery so tangled it almost felt like fate. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking on the edge of something much bigger than he could have imagined. The town was quiet, eerily so, as though the buildings themselves were holding their breath, waiting for him to uncover the truth that had been buried for decades. Dylan turned down the next street, following the map's directions toward the old mill on the outskirts of town. As he walked, he couldn't help but feel the tension rising in his chest. The closer he got to the mill, the more his mind raced with questions. What was his mother trying to protect him from? Why had she kept these secrets? What was so dangerous that it had to be hidden away for all these years? Maverick picked up the pace, sensing the change in the air, and Dylan quickened his steps to match. The mill loomed ahead, dark and silent, with its broken windows casting long shadows across the ground. It looked abandoned, but something about it felt alive, like it had been waiting for him. He stopped in front of the rusted doors, his heart thudding in his chest. He reached for the handle, but before he could turn it, Maverick barked sharply, his head tilted to one side. Dylan froze. He could hear something faint, like a creak, coming from inside the mill. He took a step back, eyes scanning the darkened building, but saw nothing. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves around him, and the hairs on the back of his neck stood up. He could feel it. Something was watching him. He wasn't alone. With a deep breath, Dylan pushed open the door, the old hinges groaning in protest. The smell of mildew and dust hit him immediately as he stepped inside. The mill was in ruins, but it wasn't empty. The air was thick with the weight of forgotten history, and Dylan could almost hear the whispers of the past echoing off the walls. He stepped further into the mill, Maverick at his side, the dog's senses alert to everything around them. The floorboards creaked under his weight, and Dylan's footsteps seemed too loud in the silence. As he moved deeper into the building, he spotted a set of stairs leading down into the darkness. Without thinking, he descended, each step taking him further into the unknown. The air grew colder as he reached the bottom, and the faintest hint of something metallic filled his nose. He looked around and saw an old chest, its surface covered in layers of dust. The key in his pocket felt heavier, as if it was urging him forward. He approached the chest, his fingers trembling slightly as he inserted the key into the lock. It clicked, and the lid creaked open. Inside, there was an old journal, much like the one he had found earlier, but this one was different. It was sealed with a wax stamp, and the writing on the cover was faded but legible. Dylan opened it slowly, his heart pounding as he read the first line, "To my son when the time comes." His breath caught in his throat. His mother had known. She had left this for him. The journal contained more than just words. It was filled with maps, old photographs, and symbols that Dylan couldn't yet understand. It was as if his mother had been preparing him for this moment, for whatever was coming next. Maverick whined softly, and Dylan looked up. The air around him felt even colder now, and the room seemed to darken. Something was wrong. As he closed the journal, he heard a sound behind him, a soft, barely audible footstep. He wasn't alone in the mill anymore. Dylan's heart raced as he turned around, Maverick growling low at his side. The shadows in the corner seemed to shift, and a figure emerged. The same man from the diner. "I told you, Dylan," the man said softly. "You don't want to know what's buried here. But now that you've opened the door, there's no turning back." Dylan stood still, his pulse racing, as the man's words echoed in his mind. No turning back. He glanced down at Maverick, who growled softly, the hairs on the dog's back standing up. The shadows in the mill seemed to shift, and the air grew thicker, heavier. The man stepped forward, his footsteps barely making a sound against the cracked wooden floor. Dylan's hand instinctively went to the journal, clutching it tightly, but the weight of the situation pressed down on him. He had no choice but to face whatever truth was hidden here. "Who are you?" Dylan asked, his voice steady but laced with urgency. The man didn't respond immediately. Instead, he studied Dylan carefully, as if measuring him. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and deliberate. "I've been trying to stop this for years. Your mother, she knew what was coming. She tried to protect you, but she was only one person. The truth she hid, it's bigger than you can imagine." Dylan's stomach tightened. The words felt like they were unraveling the very fabric of his reality. His mother had known? Had she really been trying to shield him from something this enormous? "What is this about?" Dylan demanded, his voice rising. "What's buried here?" The man stepped closer, his eyes dark with a mixture of sorrow and regret. "It's not just about what's buried in this town. It's about the people who control it, the secrets they've kept for generations. Your family, it's all connected. Your mother's part in this wasn't by accident." Dylan's mind spun. "My family? What do you mean?" The man reached into his coat and pulled out an old photograph, worn at the edges. He handed it to Dylan, who took it with trembling hands. The photo was faded, but he could make out the faces of several people gathered together in what looked like a meeting. His mother was there, younger, smiling, standing beside a man Dylan didn't recognize. The man in the photo had a presence about him, something cold and commanding. This was taken years ago, when your mother was involved with them. She thought she could stop them, but the more she learned, the more dangerous it became. She found out what they were really after, and it wasn't just money. It was power over everything, including you. Dylan felt his heart stop. "Power over me?" he whispered. The man nodded grimly. "They've been watching you, Dylan. They've known you would come to this point. And now that you've found the journal, the key, and the map, it's only a matter of time before they find you." Dylan looked at the photograph again, the weight of it sinking in. His mother had been caught up in something much darker than he had ever imagined. But why had she left him no answers? Why had she kept it all hidden? He thought of the old mill, the chest, the journal, and the key. All of it was leading him to something far more terrifying than he could have imagined. What do I do now? Down this path. But what was the truth? What had his mother been trying to protect him from? As they neared the edge of town, Dylan stopped. He felt a strange pull, as if something in the air had changed. Maverick stopped too, his ears perked up, his body tense. They weren't alone. The quiet of the town was unsettling. It was too still, like the calm before a storm. Dylan's hand instinctively reached for the journal in his jacket pocket, feeling its weight, its presence like a reminder of the mystery that was unfolding around him. He had to keep going, but where? The map had led him this far, but now what? The answer came to him suddenly, a memory of something his mother had once said. The answers are never where you expect them to be, she had told him, her voice soft but certain. Sometimes you have to look in places you never thought to search. Dylan's mind raced as he turned toward the old church on the hill, a place he hadn't thought about in years. The church had always been a place of comfort, a place where the town's people came together. But now, it felt like the right place to search for answers. As he approached the church, the doors creaked open, the old wood groaning under the weight of time. Inside, the air was thick with dust, the once pristine pews now worn and neglected. It was silent, too silent, but there was something about the place that called to him. He stepped inside, Maverick at his side, his paws making soft sounds on the old wooden floor. The church felt like a relic of the past, but as Dylan looked around, he felt a sense of purpose. He was meant to be here. The journal, the key, the map, it was all leading him to this moment. The back of the church was shrouded in shadow, but Dylan's eyes were drawn to a small, hidden door at the far end. It was old, covered in ivy, and looked as though it hadn't been used in years. Without thinking, he moved toward it. The door creaked open, revealing a small room beyond. The air was heavy, and as Dylan stepped inside, he felt a chill run down his spine. On the far wall, there was a small, wooden chest similar to the one he had found in the mill. He knew instantly that this was what he had been searching for. The chest was locked, but the key in his pocket seemed to call out to him. He inserted the key into the lock, and with a soft click, the chest opened. Inside, there were more old photographs, letters, and another map. But this one was different. It was of the town, but it was marked with places Dylan didn't recognize. Places that weren't on the original map his mother had given him. He scanned the map, his eyes narrowing as he realized what it meant. These places were hidden, buried beneath the town's history, and they held the key to the mystery his mother had been trying to protect him from. But the question remained, what was buried there? What had his mother been keeping from him all these years? Dylan felt the weight of the mystery pressing down on him. The path ahead was unclear, but one thing was certain. The truth was within his reach. And now that he had come this far, there was no turning back. Dylan stood in the small, hidden room within the church, his eyes still glued to the map spread out before him. It was clear now, his mother had been trying to protect him from something far bigger than he could have imagined. The places marked on the map were unfamiliar, and the names written beside them were written in a hurried, almost frantic hand. His heart raced as he traced the lines with his fingers. Each marking on the map was a location, but what was hidden there? The journal and the chest had been leading him here, to this moment. He could feel it deep inside. He was close. Maverick, ever watchful, stood by his side, his fur bristling as if sensing the same tension in the air. Dylan carefully folded the map, slipping it into his jacket pocket, his mind still racing with thoughts of what could be waiting for him. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, but there were still so many unanswered questions. As he turned to leave the room, he noticed something he hadn't seen before, a small symbol carved into the wooden doorframe. It was almost imperceptible, hidden beneath layers of dust and time. It looked like a circle with lines radiating outward, almost like a sun. He reached out and traced the symbol with his fingers. It felt familiar, yet foreign, as if it had been waiting for him to find it. What did it mean? The silence in the church was suffocating as Dylan stood there, deep in thought. Was this another clue? Or was it a warning? He shook his head, pushing the doubt aside. There was no time to hesitate. He had come this far. The truth was within reach. He stepped back into the main part of the church, Maverick following closely behind. The air outside was cooler now, the night settling in around him. Dylan felt the weight of the night press down on him, the uncertainty of the path ahead, making his heart heavy. He glanced back at the church, the only place that had ever felt like home, and then turned his gaze toward the road ahead. The journey was far from over. He was heading toward the next marked location on the map, the one closest to him. It was an abandoned house on the outskirts of town. He had driven past it countless times, but had never given it much thought. Now, it seemed like the next piece of the puzzle. Dylan and Maverick made their way through the streets of the quiet town, their footsteps the only sound in the stillness of the night. The town felt different now, like it was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. As they neared the old house, Dylan felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. The place looked as abandoned as he remembered. Windows boarded up, the yard overgrown with weeds. But something felt off. The door was ajar, creaking in the wind. Dylan hesitated, his hand instinctively reaching for the journal in his jacket. The familiar weight of it grounded him, reminding him of what he had to do. Maverick barked softly, urging him forward. Dylan took a deep breath and stepped inside, the floorboards groaning beneath his weight. The air inside was stale, and the faint scent of mold lingered in the corners. The house seemed frozen in time, untouched for years. As he moved through the dark, Dylan's flashlight flickered, casting long shadows on the walls. He felt like he was walking through a memory, but whose memory? Was it his mother's? Or was this the place where the secrets had begun? He moved toward the back of the house, where the map had indicated something important. The room was small, tucked away in the far corner. There, hidden beneath a pile of old furniture, was a small, rusted metal box. Dylan's heart skipped a beat. This was it. The box. The key he had found earlier had to fit. He knelt down, brushing off the dust and rust, and inserted the key. With a click, the box opened. Inside was another letter, this one addressed to him. Dylan's hands trembled as he unfolded it, his eyes scanning the familiar handwriting. Dylan, if you're reading this, it means you've found the truth. But beware, it's only the beginning. There's much more to uncover, but you have to be careful. They are watching, and they won't stop until they have what they want. Trust no one. The answers are in the ruins, but they are dangerous. Don't let them find you. Your mother. Dylan's breath caught in his throat. The warning was clear. The truth was within his grasp, but so were the dangers that came with it. And now, there was no turning back. Dylan stood frozen, the letter trembling in his hands. The warning from his mother echoed in his mind. Trust no one. His eyes scanned the familiar handwriting, each word a heavy reminder of the dangerous path he had chosen. But the truth was out there, hidden, waiting to be uncovered. He had come so far, and now he was closer than ever. Maverick, sensing his unease, let out a soft whine, nudging Dylan's leg. The dog had been by his side through everything, and now, more than ever, Dylan felt a deep connection to the loyal companion who had always been there. He folded the letter carefully and placed it in his jacket pocket, the weight of it settling heavily against his chest. The room around him seemed to close in, the walls pressing in with the knowledge that the next step would bring him face to face with the truth. He had to keep moving forward. The letter had mentioned the ruins, and now he had a direction. The map, the journal, and everything that had led him here pointed toward a location on the outskirts of town, an old, forgotten building that had once been the center of the town's most guarded. Secrets. The wind had picked up outside, and the night seemed to be holding its breath as Dylan stepped out of the house. Maverick followed, his steps quiet but purposeful, always alert to their surroundings. The streets of the town were eerily quiet, almost too quiet, as if everyone was waiting for something to happen. Dylan felt it in the air, the calm before the storm. He headed toward the edge of town, his mind focused on what lay ahead. The ruins were just outside, nestled between thick trees and overgrown paths. As Dylan approached, the building came into view, once grand, now crumbling and decayed. The stone structure was covered in vines, its windows shattered, its doors hanging open, as if inviting him in. Dylan paused, his hand on the old, weathered doorframe. Something about this place felt wrong, like it had been waiting for him. He took a deep breath and stepped inside, the floor creaking beneath his weight. The air was thick with dust and age, the scent of decay clinging to every corner. It was silent, too silent, and the hairs on the back of Dylan's neck stood up. He wasn't alone. Maverick growled low, his eyes scanning the darkness as they moved deeper into the ruins. Dylan's flashlight flickered, casting long shadows across the broken walls. The beams of light caught glimpses of old, forgotten artifacts, pieces of furniture, shattered glass, and remnants of a time long past. But Dylan's focus was on the back of the room, where the map had pointed him. As he approached, his heart raced. There, hidden beneath a pile of rubble, was a small, wooden chest. It looked out of place among the decay, as if it had been deliberately left untouched for years. Dylan knelt down, his hands trembling as he reached for the chest. The key from earlier, now worn with use, seemed to pulse in his pocket, urging him forward. With careful hands, he unlocked the chest. The lid creaked open, revealing a stack of old papers bound together with a string. Dylan pulled them out, his eyes scanning the pages. These were different from the other journals. This was something far more personal. It was his mother's writing, but there was something else. Along with the papers was a